Hi, I'm Jen, and welcome to Christian Fire Poppy. Today is June 27th, 2024, and it is the 180th anniversary of the Joseph Smith Martyrdom. It's also the anniversary of the Nauvoo Temple Dedication, the new rebuilt one. Now, I cannot wait for you guys to see what I'm seeing, and that is how the martyrdom and the Nauvoo Temple dedication ties into this Zechariah prophecy and what is written in the stars on the day of the martyrdom is going to blow your socks off. I cannot wait to show you. So today, June 27th, the 180th anniversary of Joseph Smith's martyrdom and the 22nd anniversary of the new Nauvoo Temple dedication that was on June 27th, 2002. So Joseph Smith's martyrdom on the Hebrew calendar was on the 10th of Tammuz. And the reason that day is significant because that is really the kickoff event that begins this 21 days of fasting and sadness that culminates and ends on Tish B'Av, the abomination of desolation day, the 9th of Av. So this is a day in the Jewish calendar that marks the capture of King Zedekiah by Babylonian troops. And in a symbolic sense, we have Joseph Smith, our leader, who was captured and killed on the 10th of Tammuz. So it's a pretty fitting Hebrew day. And then it gets even more interesting because the new Nauvoo Temple, it was dedicated on just our regular calendar. It was the same day as the martyrdom, but on the Hebrew calendar, it's the 17th of Tammuz. And that's like the next important milestone on this time of mourning. And so the 17th of Tammuz is the 17th day of the fourth Hebrew month. Now, the fourth Hebrew month is important because that is in the Zechariah prophecy. So remember that. And it marks the beginning of the 3-week mourning period leading up to Tish B'Av. So it's a minor fast day that the Jews recognize. And the dedication of the Nauvoo Temple on June 27th, 2002, which coincided with 17 Tammuz on the Hebrew calendar, a day traditionally marked by fasting, mourning, holds special significance. This date corresponds to one of the fast days mentioned in Zechariah's prophecy. So in Zechariah 8:18, where these solemn occasions are foretold to one day become days of joy and celebration, most likely associated with worship at restored temples. So the Nauvoo dedication thus serves as a possible partial fulfillment and foreshadowing of future events when such days will no longer be marked by sorrow, but by rejoicing and spiritual renewal. So this idea of days of sorrow being turned to days of joy. Let's check it out. Zechariah 8:18, it says, "And the word of the Lord of hosts came unto me, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the fast of the 4th month," so that's Tammuz, the 4th month, "and the fast of the 5th, and the 7th, and the fast of the 10th shall be to the house of Judah joy and gladness and cheerful feasts. Therefore love the truth and peace." So first it lists all of the sad fasting days and says they'll be turned to days of joy. So thus saith the Lord of hosts, it shall yet come to pass that there shall come people and the inhabitants of many cities, and the inhabitants of one city shall go to another, saying, Let us go speedily to pray before the Lord and to seek the Lord of hosts. I will go also. Yea, many people and strong nations shall come to seek the Lord of hosts in Jerusalem and to pray before the Lord. So this idea of people flowing in and coming to pray and to seek the Lord, this fits in very well with many other scriptures that talk about people flowing to the temple. And the Nauvoo Temple is dedicated on the fast of the 4th month. So it is also the Joseph Smith Martyrdom Day, and this day of mourning is now a day of joy and truth. And it's the first one listed. So it's kind of interesting to think that the fast of the fourth month, now here in the New Jerusalem, is a day of joy. So the next fast that's coming on the fifth month, that would be Tish B'Av, or it's also called the Abomination of Desolation Day. And it would be pretty interesting if, say, the Salt Lake Temple were to be dedicated on that day, turning that day of sadness into a day of joy, or if another temple was dedicated on that day. And so I think in the future, we'll see all of these Jewish days of fasting and mourning eventually be turned into days of gladness. And wouldn't that be pretty awesome? Maybe this fast of the 10th will be the final Israel Jerusalem temple. Who knows? But here it says the 17th of Tammuz, also known as Shiva Asar B'Tammuz in Hebrew, is a minor Jewish fast day that commemorates several tragic events in Jewish history. And it's the beginning of a 3-week period leading up to Tish B'Av, also known as the 9th of Av. All right, so we are going to transition into looking at some interesting things that are happening on the day that, I should say, were happening on the day that Joseph Smith was martyred. So first, I want to just give this preface. This is really cool that in April of 2020 in General Conference, our prophet, President Nelson, said, "Nothing will be withheld." And if you look at the footnotes, and in our most recent General Conference, Sister Dennis gave us these wonderful words of wisdom to study the talks of our prophet, including the beautiful teachings in the footnotes. So as I did what she asked, I found some beautiful things in the footnotes, and in the footnotes where he says that nothing shall be withheld, and that is connected. This is, if you go to the footnotes, it's Doctrine and Covenants 121, and it says a time to come in which nothing shall be withheld. And then it goes on to specify also, if there be bounds set to the heavens, or to the sun, moon, or stars, the times of their revolutions, the appointed days, months, years, and all the days of their days, months, years, glories, laws, set times shall be revealed in the days of the dispensation of the fullness of times. Thank you to Garrett Menck, who sent me these slides. And this is a great slide to throw on here. And also, just a reminder, we're going to be looking at some signs that are happening in the cosmos. Why would we be looking at signs in the heavens? Trust me, I have always had a strong gag reflex when it comes to astrology, so I know nothing of that, of the way that people look at it, but there has always been this biblical, scriptural affirmation that his signs are in the sun, moon, and the stars, as it says in Luke 21:25. And in Psalms 19, it says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament sheweth his handiwork day unto day." That reminds me of that Doctrine and Covenant scripture. "It uttereth speech, and night unto night sheweth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard." And then in Alma 30:44 in the Book of Mormon, it says, "The scriptures are laid before thee, and all things denote there is a God. Yea, even the earth and its motion, yea, and also all the planets which move in their regular form do witness that there is a supreme creator." That is just the beginning of many scriptures on this slide and many more that I did not include. But how can the heavens utter language day to day and testify of Jesus Christ? Well, I think you're going to have something to think about after I show you today, because this is just wild. So the day that Joseph Smith was martyred on 6/27/1844, we know that it was just after 5 p.m. And if you go to Stellarium, now this is something that any of you can get online, go to Stellarium, and you can search the names of minor planets, or they're also called asteroids, and they're just all floating randomly out there. And if you look at the names, so what I did is I just started searching for key names that are obvious that have to do with the story of the Joseph Smith martyrdom. And I was so shocked to find these just all clustered together in the perfect location. You have the constellation here of the two brothers, the twins. So what better location than to have the depiction of the martyrdom of Joseph Smith and Hiram right here in the two brothers constellation? And of course, you have the sun highlighting it. You have Mars. There's Venus over here. This is where the beehive cluster is, the beehive representing the church. And this was a day of gall and bitterness. So it's right here in the beehive cluster because Joseph Smith, it was terrible. He was murdered with a pistol, and you have pistoletto here. Edo just meaning kind of a little minor addition. It doesn't change the meaning of the main word pistol. And then you have Emma and Joseph Smith Church. You have the people that were there in Carthage jail. You have Reynolds and Fulmer and Taylor and Jones. And I think most surprising it, most of all, that it's so precise with its timing is this minor planet that's called Ford. So we had Governor Ford, his name is notoriously connected to the murder of Joseph Smith in the sense that he was warned over and over again to protect Joseph Smith, and he refused to do it. So let's take a look at what is happening in the heavens. Number one, we have Joseph's wife, Emma, who grieves when she gets the message that Joseph had been murdered. So number one, there's actually a minor planet called Emma Grieves, and it's in an interesting location right next to Mercury. So being highlighted by Mercury, which oftentimes is just a symbol related to a messenger, and it's in the tip of the horn. And I think of this bowl. When we go to the temple, it's the bowl, the power of Israel. You have the Jews and the Gentiles and the church. And so you have Emma Greaves at the tip of the horn right next to Mercury. And then number two, you have Ford. Now I'm going to show you how the moon overlaps with Ford at the exact hour that Joseph Smith is martyred, because the moon moves very quickly, minute to minute, hour to hour. So I'll show you as you change hours within that same day, the moon grows very far, but right at that 5 o'clock hour, it is intersecting with the moon. So Governor Ford, the story is that he denied responsibility for the mob murder. However, two men later gave affidavits suggesting Ford knew of the plot and could have approved of it. So Dan Jones, a riverboat captain and one of the few eyewitnesses to both sides of the event, he repeatedly warned Ford throughout the day of comments. He had heard comments from the guards and jail keepers concerning their plot to assassinate the restored church leaders. In response, Ford supposedly replied, "You are unnecessarily alarmed for your friend's safety, sir. The people are not that cruel." Irritated by the remark, Jones urged the necessity of placing better men than professed assassins to guard them. He stressed that the Smiths were American citizens surrendered to Ford's pledged honor. But when Ford showed little interest in Jones' concerns, Jones commented, "I had then but one request to make. If you, Ford, left their lives in the hands of those men to be sacrificed, that the Almighty will preserve my life to a proper time and place to testify that you have been timely warned of their danger." So we'll take a close look at that name Jones, which is right there in the mix of this depiction. But let's take a look at Stellarium very quickly so I can show you how precise this timing is. So here you can see the name Governor Ford right over the moon. So as I zoom in, you can see that's the moon and that's Ford. And as I change the time, so you can see the day of the martyrdom in 1844 on June 27th. We are looking from the perspective of Illinois. And watch this as we, oh, me make sure the name is on so it tracks. But watch as we just go down an hour. So it's still the same day on June 27th. We're just moving a few hours early, and see how far they are from each other already. So it's right when it gets to that 17, which is 5 p.m., that it is overlapping very nicely. So there we go. It's pretty cool. Let's check out Emma Graves. Let me show you so you can see live. You can go to so you can see the name of this asteroid, Emma Graves, at the tip of the horn, right near Mercury, on the day of the martyrdom. And this is a day of much bitterness and gall. So you can see the gall right here near Venus, which is highlighting this beehive cluster, which is right here. And we have the infamous pistol is right in that location as well. Okay, and then we have for number 3, the prophet Joseph Smith went to Washington to meet with Congress and the President of the United States regarding the saints' plea for redress and restoration of their rights. After Joseph addressed President Van Buren, the president said, "What can I do? I can do nothing for you. If I do anything, I shall come in contact with the whole state of Missouri." So he's afraid of the people and does nothing. He might as well have just washed his hands in the water like Pilate and said, "I'm too afraid of what the people will do to stop this." And then you have Emma Graving here. So let's take a look at the next point. So if we look at number 4, we have the name Fulmer. And now Fulmer is a very on point name to have right here in the sun next to Joseph Church and right in the mix of this depiction of the martyrdom. So Fulmer, he was in Carthage jail, and Fulmer enjoyed a very close friendship with Joseph Smith, and he served for a time as his private secretary. He was among the men who came to Carthage with Joseph and Hiram Smith in June 1844. Although the other men charged with riot were released on bail of $500, Joseph and Hiram were charged with treason. They were taken to jail, and Fulmer was one of the men who chose to stay the night with Joseph and Hiram to protect them and to keep them company. Now, Fulmer had a pistol with him and gave it to Joseph, which Hiram used later to defend himself. So sometime on June 27th, Joseph sent John Fulmer on an errand to secure legal assistance. So consequently, he was not in the jail when the mob attacked and killed by Joseph and Hiram. So Joseph really saved him there, sending him out on an errand. And look at all these names that we have here. So we have the beehive representing the church, gall and bitterness right there. We have Joseph was killed by mob justice. And so there is no asteroid that is named mob, but we have mob, yes. And eos, I'll show you, is a Roman word meaning justice or the law. So we have mob justice. We have Emma, sun. So I think of that as Emma, celestial. And then we have Joseph, church. So we know Joseph initiated the restored church of Jesus Christ. And then we have Smith. I think this is a great location for Smith, and I will explain that soon. And then we have Broderick, which means brothers. So again, this imagery of 2 brothers that loved each other who were both killed on this day. We have Lorenzo Wasson. So we have the name Wasson that is right in here. And we also have So Wasson is right up here with this beehive cluster. And then we also have Taylor Jones, which that's a great depiction. And it's actually a perfect pairing to have John Taylor and Dan Jones together. There are many accounts of John Taylor and Dan Jones discussing things together, and they stayed that night in Carthage. So let's take a look at number 5. We have Reynolds. He was the one standing guard at Joseph Smith's mansion house, and he was also in Carthage with Joseph Smith. And the record states Joseph instructed Reynolds Cahoon to return to Nauvoo with all haste. So he was there for a while, but not at the very end. So on June 22nd, 1844, just 5 days before the martyrdom, Reynolds was asked by the prophet Joseph to stand guard at the mansion house. On that night, this is his account, it says, about 9 p.m., Hiram came out of the mansion and gave his hand to Reynolds Cahoon, at the same time saying, a company of men are seeking to kill my brother Joseph, and the Lord has warned him to flee to the Rocky Mountains to save his life. In a few minutes afterwards, Joseph came from his family. His tears were flowing fast. He held a handkerchief to his face and followed after Brother Hiram without uttering a word. So these were solemn moments recorded and witnessed by many of these names. So let's talk about this depiction. We have Smith, and Smith is right at the head of this dog that is riding on the back of a unicorn. Now that sounds pretty odd, but if you turn to how the Jews view things, the Ephraim Gentile, it looks like an Ephraim Gentile sacrifice on the back of the perfect sacrifice. So we know that dog is used to distinguish Gentiles from Jews. It's a common depiction, just as in scripture when Jesus talked about the Gentiles as being dogs. And the Re'im is mentioned in many verses in the Bible, and it was associated with strength and power. It is the unicorn in Judaism, and it is one of the symbols of the tribe of Ephraim, which is a perfect connection for Joseph Smith to be an Ephraim of the Gentiles. And in the Talmud, you actually have this connection of the unicorn being sacrificed by Adam, or an ox. It was an ox that Adam, the first man, sacrificed as a thanks offering for his life being spared. And it had a single horn on its forehead, as it's stated. So we have this idea that unicorns in the Bible symbolize strength, power, and ferocity, and they are associated with Jesus Christ as a perfect sacrifice and represent the sacrificial animal of choice for the Israelites. So it's actually a pretty perfect symbolic depiction, as this is a day of sacrifice, and this is known as a lesser constellation. So you have this lesser sacrifice, whereas you have the perfect sacrifice of Jesus Christ, and you have Joseph Smith following as a type and shadow. So the dog riding and following the pattern of the unicorn sacrificing its life. So we have Joseph martyred by the mob, and you can see here that Eos means justice, or a place where justice is sought, or the law. And the term mob justice is when a person is suspected to be a criminal and the mob just is beaten by a group or crowd and anything, to hurt and injure them. We have mob justice right here. And let's take a minute to check this out on Stellarium so you can see live where these are located. So here on 6/27, 1844, you can see this live Joseph Church. So Joseph helping with the restoration of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You can see right here Mars and the sun, and we have martyrdom by the Mobius, and we have a celestial Emma sun. And you can see Smith, right? The dog riding on the unicorn. You can see how close to the sun Fulmer is. And Reynolds. Next, we are going to be looking at Broderick, which means brothers. You can see that really, really close to the sun. And then we are going to be talking about Murden, which means murder. So you can see this right here with your own eyes. Broderick means brother. And the only reason I found this and knew this is because Broderick is one of my favorite family history connections. You guys know how much I love connections, and I love family history, and I love church history, and I love the prophet Joseph Smith, and I love our prophet President Nelson. And so Broderick ties into all the things that I love. So if you will just indulge me for 1 minute while I share this little personal piece. And just, I'm not trying to say this in pride. It's just our family history and ancestors are important. But on the other hand, we also have to remember what Jesus said, that I can raise up. The Pharisees were always so proud that they were of the seed of Abraham. And Jesus reminded them that he could raise the seed of Abraham from stones. So it's much more important that we live our lives, even if we don't have pioneer heritage, we can be the pioneers. It's about what we do in our relationship with Jesus Christ. But let me just share this really fast, because this was how I found this brothers or Broderick, because it is my direct ancestor, the Broderick line, where you have Elizabeth Hillard. So this is my great-great-great-grandmother, and her sister is President Nelson's great-great-grandmother, Emma Jane Hillard, and they were the only two people in their giant family that had the faith to leave England and join the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and go to America. And there are some great stories, and these two sisters were such good friends, Elizabeth and Emma. And I did not know these stories or my personal connection to President Nelson until later. It was only a few years ago that I found out. So before I knew, I had named my daughters Elizabeth and used the name Emma. In fact, my husband wanted to name my second daughter Emma, and I fought him on it. I wasn't as inspired as he was. So her first name is Julie, and her middle name is Emma. So we have an Elizabeth and Emma, and these girls of mine are best friends, just like these family history girls. So I love that the name Broderick is right there, and it means brothers. And I have these two sisters that are close. And I also find it kind of cool that my husband has a relationship to Joseph Smith and to Lucy Mack, and there are two different ways that he connects to them. It's definitely not a direct line or anything like that. A third cousin 5 times removed and a third cousin 7 times removed. But I'll take what I can get, any connection to Joseph Smith. So that's pretty cool. So if we look at our next word, this is where it gets dark. So Murden, meaning murder. And this is not the first time we have seen this coincidence with the word Murden and the word murder. So Christian Pentecost, which was 40 days after the eclipse on May 19th, we had a similar depiction, a likeness of things in the heavens looking like the likeness of things on the earth. So on that day, the Iran president Raisi was killed in a crash, and it was right after attending the dam inauguration in Azerbaijan. So many suspect assassination, and you can see here that the headlines say accident, or air quotes, political accident. And you can see the name Rice, the base word Rice, meaning chief or ruler. And then the sun, Jupiter, Venus, Uranus are all stacked. And you have the location of Azerbaijan and Iran. And there's that Murden. So again, on the day of the martyrdom, you have that Murden right there. Let's take a look at number 10, Taylor Jones. So you have to have John Taylor and Dan Jones in the mix. So Dan Jones was the one trying to convince Governor Ford to protect Joseph Smith. And here on Church News, you can see that it talks about the brothers' final hours in Carthage. The first name listed is John Taylor, and the last name listed is Dan Jones. And they stayed the night and were faithful to Joseph Smith and their testimonies. Now, this is kind of a random connection that I thought was just kind of interesting. It might not be significant, probably not, but maybe. So I'm just throwing it at her because it's kind of interesting. But June 23rd in 1844, this was the time when Joseph Smith fled to Iowa. He knew that his life was in danger and he was running away. And it was really sad because so many of his friends, they had so much faith that they didn't think Joseph could be killed. And they pleaded with him to come back. And he did. He said that if my life is of no value to my friends, then it's of no value to me. And that's so sad because he fled Illinois to avoid arrest and he crossed the Mississippi River into Iowa. And there was a posse under the command of the governor that entered Nauvoo to execute the arrest warrant, but they were unable to locate Smith. So it's kind of interesting to look at what was happening this year in Iowa on June 23rd, and they were having disasters. So there was a bridge in connecting Iowa and South Dakota that collapsed. And you had flooding forcing people from their homes. Biden approves Iowa disaster declaration, unlocking federal funds following extreme flooding. That's kind of wild. And I just also wanted to share, so I had the really amazing opportunity to go to the Nauvoo Temple last year on the martyrdom anniversary. So exactly 1 year from today, I was in Nauvoo, and it was my first time going back since my husband and I got married in the Nauvoo Temple in 2004. So you can see our pictures here, 2004, we're still young and carefree. This is us last year recreating that picture. And these two are pictures that I was able to take while I was there of the temple at night. And this is the statue of the final ride of Joseph Smith and Hiram. And again, you have that connection of the martyrdom and the Nauvoo Temple being rededicated on the same day. And it was just such an amazing experience. We were able to do sealings as an entire extended family, a big family reunion. We went in the morning and we did sealings together as a family. And it was one of the most profound temple experiences that I've ever had. And even the sealer who's there all the time remarked on what a special experience that was. And there were some coincidental miracle type things that he talked about and made note of. And it's just a day that I'll always remember. And I just wanted to share with you guys because I think that I have one more family history connection, and I can't help but share these little family history connections because so much of my family is tied into this history in Nauvoo and everything that was happening. And one of my direct ancestors, so my maiden name is Washburn, and this is about Tamar and Abraham Washburn, who they were the ones who converted to the gospel. They were baptized by Parley Pratt. And you can see in her journal, she talks about giving money and helping Parley Pratt plenty for his needs. And I feel like this, she has what she wrote down as a comforting vision. And I think this might be comforting for anyone who has had to lose someone, lost a child, or just lost a loved one. And so this is her story. She says, slowly the light drifted from her eyes, and Tamar found herself lying on her bed in her humble New York home. Her heart was full as she pondered the vision which had just closed from before her eyes. Her emotions were mixed about the things which she had just beheld, but she had a feeling of overwhelming peace. Sometime during the night, Tamar had found herself in a beautiful and very orderly place. She decided she must be in heaven. As she looked around, she saw a small group of children being tutored and carefully cared for by a most gracious lady. Among the group were two of her own children, Daniel and Elizabeth. The kind lady in charge of the group said to her, "Do not grieve for your children. It is your privilege to see beforehand the joy and happiness surrounding them, so you will not mourn for them." With this, the vision closed. Tamar pondered these things in her heart, knowing that they must come to pass. It was not long after this that her young son, Daniel, age 11, and her small daughter of 3, Elizabeth, died. The impression of this vision sustained her through this trial, and she did not grieve. Knowing of a surety that they were happy and well taken care of, Tamar went on to be a wonderful mother of 11 children, one of whom was adopted. But this was not the end of her trials. So, man, those pioneers, they had so many trials and they lost so many children, which would be so incredibly difficult. And to add on to this story, so when we were in Nauvoo, our entire family gathered around this grave marker here because these are two more of her children. So after she had that vision and she lost Elizabeth and Daniel, she then later lost two more children, Sarah Elizabeth and John Washburn. And you can see this was all they could afford was this little stone for their two children that said SEW and JEW. And I'm not going to share it, it's too long, but we have a miraculous family story of how we found this grave marker and learned that it was our ancestors. So it was really special to go and get to see that and gather around and just share stories. And one of the beauties of listening to these stories and connecting with them is that it reminds us that those stories and experiences that the saints went through, those are ours, whether you're related to them or not. We are a continuation. We are part of Israel now, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The story continues to unfold, and we get to make those choices and to decide what will our part in this great and grand and glorious story be. And of course, we have the sunstone here with the trumpets and all of the lovely Nauvoo sites. So let's continue the story together and let's do the daily goal through September 9th. This year, President Nelson's 100th birthday, he got on social media and he challenged everybody to a 100-day challenge. So exactly 100 days before his birthday, he said, please reach out to the one who may be feeling lost or alone. So let's continue to reach out to the one. Thank you for joining me today. In Matthew 6:32, it says, "Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these." And I love when someone commented and told me that poppies are actually the flower of Israel, and those were most likely the lilies of the field referred to in the scripture. How beautiful. So let's bloom despite the smoke of confusion and the flames of world chaos like true fire poppies. A Zion field of many fire poppies will inspire hope and joy in the gospel. Join us for more fiery passion and preparedness as we fly into the second coming of Jesus Christ.